What's up, YouTube? Zach's back with another attack, and today we're talking about episode 3 of season 2 of This Is Us. So grab your tissues, you might need them, and let's get right into it, because this might be the second best show that I have ever seen. The first is that one show about the beavers, and man, that was the best damn show I've ever seen.
Zach's back with another attack, so come on in and just relax. Hit subscribe and join the fun. You're Zach to the future now, son.
Alright guys, so this episode was a good one, just like all of the rest. In this episode, we had several storylines going. Once again, we had Jack and Rebecca getting recovery from their fight and getting back into the swing of things, getting into their relationship, as well as Jack overall just learning how to talk to Rebecca about his issues and fixing their relationship. They were at a point where they were really only saying good morning and good night and not a whole lot in between. Beth and Randall got approved to foster a girl named Deja. That was an interesting storyline to get going and start to follow. The whole storyline with them becoming foster parents or wanting to adopt has been going for a couple episodes now, but now that it's actually going and they actually have a kid, it's really interesting to see how that's affecting not only their lives, but also their children's lives. There wasn't a big storyline with Kate this week, but we did have a huge storyline. Probably the biggest storyline of the episode was with Kevin and his movie. We actually had Sylvester Stallone in this episode, which was really cool. I knew he was coming, but I wasn't sure when or what role he would play, but now it's here, and we have seen what's going on with him, so that's exciting. He played a great character. He was himself, so of course it's a great character. But he actually interacted a lot with the characters, and it became a really cool thing. And I'm excited to see what happens with him in the future episodes. So we're going to be adding Deja and Sylvester Stallone onto the characters as we go through them. But overall in this episode, the only things that I really have to say is that it was a little weird to see Rebecca talking to Miguel's ex-wife. That was a little weird knowing what we know in the present day of the show, but in the past, I guess it kind of works. We'll see how that dynamic kind of plays out. Definitely always a pleasure to have William back and go back a little bit. He almost didn't stay with Randall. That would have made everything way different, so thanks to Annie, I believe, is the littler one who convinced him to stay. I was sadly missing Toby, but, you know, he'll be back in the next episode, I'm sure. And I thought that this episode really is pushing some characterization forward for Kevin and dealing with his emotions over his father, as well as just getting things going with his movie and everything like that. So it was definitely an interesting episode. I'm going to get into the characters a little quicker because there's not a whole lot about this episode as a whole that I can't really get into with the characters. I'll kind of go through it all character by character a little bit. So let's start off with Randall. He had a good arc because the girl they fostered, Deja, she is afraid of him. She flinches when he walks into the room as she's getting into a fight with Beth. She has some cigarettes and Beth finds them trying to help her unpack her stuff into her room in Randall and Beth's house. And when she tries to confront her asking what she's doing with cigarettes, she calls her a bitch. And they get into a little bit of a spat until Randall walks in and she just flinches. I don't know if she was abused by her father or what the situation is. We do figure out that Deja's mom is going to jail for a long time. They don't say how long or what exactly is going on, I don't think, but we do know that they're going to be with her for a while, and that's interesting, but it also leaves some room for the writers to get rid of Deja if audiences aren't receptive to her, or if they just need a way out. It's kind of weird, but I kind of like it. I'd almost rather them have adopted an infant because then they're stuck with it no matter what, and we'll see where that goes, but at least this kind of gives them a little bit of wiggle room. And there's a lot of characterization already done for this character. She's kind of her own person already, whereas adopting a newborn, it's like a blank slate, and you don't really have a lot going on with a baby for a few seasons or whatever, so I kind of like that. As for Beth, other than the fight that she gets into with Deja, we don't see a whole lot. She is becoming good at helping Randall get adjusted to this whole situation. He's still a little on edge until towards the end he has a conversation with Deja saying that he is reminded of himself because of her and her situation, and he really helps her get a little more comfortable, especially with him personally, by saying that he knows what she's going through and he's kind of has a similar situation. But once they tell her that her mom's in jail and might not be coming back for a long time, she smashes the picture of him and his parents and runs away, assuming to her bedroom, but we don't know for sure yet, so we'll see how that plays out. Beth's just good for keeping Randall calm for now. There was a few times when she got a little too worked up, I think. After Deja smashed that picture, Beth seemed to get upset and kind of try to go resolve the situation, but Randall just told her to sit back down and it was okay. Good to see Randall take the calmer characterization right there. And also Beth freaked out a little bit when she saw those cigarettes. I think Randall understands the situation that Deja's in a little better than Beth because he relates to it a little bit more than Beth would. And Tess and Annie, they really shined in this episode. Like I said, I believe it was Annie. We had a flashback to her talking to William as he was trying to leave, and it was kind of a similar situation with William and Deja wanting to leave and not being used to the new house and how quiet it is and how good it is overall. And Annie just tells them that she knows the combo to not have the alarm go off when they leave the house, but they should stay, and she kind of convinces Deja to sit in the room with them and be a little more comfortable. So that was cool. Those kids are just great kids, which I think may make it a little bit harder for Randall and Beth to get used to having Deja, but once again, it'll be really cool to see how that all plays out. Moving right along, we have Kevin, and he is going through a lot in this episode, dealing with his emotions. Kate kind of had the thing in the last season where she went to the pound class and was able to scream and let out her feelings, and she shared with Kevin in this episode that she was told that leaving those feelings inside of her is like taking a big breath and just holding it until she can't anymore, and that's when she screamed and everything. Kevin's going through a similar situation, and Kate tells him to let it out, which he has a hard time with, and he says maybe eventually at the end of this episode, but he still hasn't done a whole lot. He blew some of his scenes in this from his movie because not only did Kate talk to Sylvester Stallone about their dad, but Sylvester Stallone then went on to talk to Kevin about it right before they shot their scene, and he forgot all of his lines. He kept thinking about him and his father whenever he went to say his line, and then he also fell into a hole and injured his knee during shooting, and apparently it was the same knee that he hurt when they showed him in a cast in the first episode when they showed everybody reacting to Jack's death. So that's really interesting. We still don't know what happened, but there was some flashbacks of Jack putting a medal on Kevin's neck, which I assume is the medal that's in Rebecca's passenger seat as she's driving to the house. And when Kate says in that first episode she needs to go find Kevin and tell him that Jack has died, Kevin is out with Sophie in a car making out, and it shows Kate going to that car and he's sleeping inside of it, assumingly with Sophie. We're not entirely sure. I didn't see Sophie in the car, but I don't know if he was living in that car. Maybe him and Jack got in some kind of fight and that's why he wasn't with the kids, or maybe just him and Sophie had snuck out. He said he was with someone else or something. I don't entirely know, but that's going to be interesting too. Part of me definitely thinks that him and Jack got into a fight and he left the house and was staying in his car, and then Jack died before they could resolve things, and that's why he's having such a hard time dealing with this. Which would be an interesting way to go, but I don't know if that's going to happen like that, or if he was just in the car because he was trying to get some alone time with Sophie. Speaking of which, Sophie wasn't in this episode at all, nor was Toby, but Kate was, and once again, the only really characterization she had was talking to Sylvester Stallone about Jack, and Sylvester Stallone was encouraging her to go and try and be a singer, which was really cool. I think she's going to use that to continue. He might even have some connections that can help her get her singing career going, which will be really cool. It's always good to have Sylvester Stallone on your side. I mean, come on. And then Kevin tells Kate that she is broken and sad all the time, and of course he apologizes, they make up, but that was a moment where he was kind of a jerk to Kate and she didn't deserve it, so I feel for her there. But at the same time, why would Sylvester Stallone talk about something that upsets Kevin right before they film their scene? And in the movie that they're shooting, Sylvester Stallone is a father figure to Kevin's character, so I don't really get why they would talk about that right before doing something that would make him remember things about his father and mess him up. That didn't make sense to me, but it was natural, so it worked. Miguel was also not in this episode, so that's something we can kind of breeze past other than his wife and Rebecca being friends, but I guess we'll see about that later. I didn't know they were good friends still or anything, but that could be interesting if they're still friends when Jack dies and she gets with Miguel. But Rebecca and Jack are really working on their problems here. Jack goes to AA and talks about how he needs to talk to his wife. Seems like his drinking problem's a lot better. He admits to Rebecca that he had to borrow money to buy their house from his father. And, you know, part of me still wonders about that last episode of season 1. They made some enemies with the wrong people, and I wonder if that's partially what happened with the house fire. Not to jump to the predictions or anything, but I'm kind of wondering if there may be something playing into that. Another big thing with Jack and Rebecca is that they went to a place where they had one of their first dates, and the concert got rained out on that date, so they kind of just sat in their car and made out and did stuff. And Rebecca was kind of trying to recreate that in this episode. She climbed on top of him and he told her that he couldn't do it and everything, so they had hamburgers that they were going to eat. And when they drove back to the house after he said that he couldn't do it, they still hadn't eaten their hamburgers. He gets back in the car and says he wants to keep talking to her, so she throws the hamburgers behind her, gets in the car, and they keep talking. Then, when they get back out of the car, there is a puppy eating those hamburgers, and I'm sure you see where this is going. That puppy is Kate's dog. So, now going to predictions, I do think that probably the stuff in the finale of last season didn't have anything to do with that. I think they're kind of done with that. The guys who they picked an issue with got all their money, so I think that's done and over with. But I do think that that puppy still had something to do with the fire. I do think that something happened either with the puppy starting the fire, Jack ran back in. I think maybe Kevin got hurt in that fire, and then Jack did something. It's hard to tell. This show is so subtle, and we didn't get any hints this episode or the last episode, really. But the puzzle pieces are slowly starting to come together. We got the dog now. We see the medals that she had in her passenger seat. We didn't really learn much, but we're kind of figuring out a little bit about Kevin's knee and what happened with that. We at least know that it was his knee and not like a broken leg or something. So maybe that's a hint. I don't know. I do think next episode we will learn something else. I don't think we'll learn a whole lot more, but I do think we will learn enough to get another piece of the puzzle going well, because that's kind of how the show works. It leads you on for a little bit and then it gives you something big. And I do think since this episode and the last episode kind of ended on softer notes, the first episode ended with them all sitting around crying, realizing Jack died, and Rebecca goes to the house, sees it all burnt down, and that was a huge shock. Now, the episode last week ended with Jack going to an AA meeting. That was not as crazy. And then this episode ended with Kate looking at Jack's ashes, and her and Kevin kind of just apologized, and she says that Kevin is just like Jack, and that's about it. But it didn't tell us a whole lot. It wasn't that shocking. So I'm really hoping next week's episode is going to leave us speechless with its ending and leave us really drooling, wanting more. So we'll see how that goes, guys. But in the meantime, stay tuned for the next week's episode. I'm Zach. Don't you do crack, and I'll catch you in the future.